Can you imagine if you're with a group and you cannot read social signs? You can't read danger, high voltage, or just entry or exit, or ladies and gents, this sort of thing. Unless you're with friends who don't pressure you and don't tease and taunt, you're going to have to develop quite a thick skin.
I stopped going to school about 4 years ago, must have been. I used to kick off with the teachers because they just used to wind me up, just to keep on doing my head in. If my writing wasn't as neat as everyone else's, they used to moan about that, and because I can't sit still for too long, and they used to moan at me about that. It's not my fault that I can't sit still, and when they was moaning, it was just winding me up. Backs off and lets me kick everything.
We have got so many 16-year-olds at the moment, 16, 17, 18, who really can hardly read and write. And I really mean can't read and write. Dwayne could not write his own name correctly the first time he signed in for our health and safety. And that must be terrible for a 16-year-old who is quite self-assured otherwise. I can't imagine having to cross your name out when you can't spell it correctly.
Like if I was in school sat next to someone, I wouldn't do no writing because my writing's so messy. And everybody else is writing, like when you look at it, it's really neat. Like I could only just about make out what I was writing. And I just started doing my head in, so I just stopped doing the work.
Can you imagine? They say, right, we're going to learn about American Midwest today. So we'll all read a paragraph each around a classroom, which still happens, and you are counting how many children are before you so that you can work out how to read your bit, and you can't. So you kick off because you know you've got to be out of the classroom, or you're going to be ridiculed, or you're going to be told, why aren't you concentrating, etc. Eventually they will end up being suspended if they do it enough, and eventually even kicked out of school. They then are off wandering in the town if they can possibly get away with it, or they bunk off school because they just can't bear it. And they end up maybe all of the ones that are mischief, because if they're dyslexic, they will also be intelligent. If you're intelligent, you can't read and write, the combination is awful. So you will use your intelligence to do naughty things, which is why there are some pretty intelligent criminals, to be quite honest.
No one's ever really got through to Dwayne. No one. Because I think Dwayne felt so different from everyone, because that's how he was made to feel. And I think because he felt so different, so I think when Ollie West came in here and started telling Dwayne his own experiences, and Dwayne would be looking at him thinking, well, yeah, that happened to me, or yeah, I do that. So I think he's probably the first person he's ever actually related to. I don't think it's been anybody else that has ever made an impact on him.
Sitting in a classroom, being asked to do just one thing, which is listen and not do anything else, is almost impossible. And I think Dwayne would agree that that's one of the issues that he's always had.
Schools are meant to be the ones teaching us, but then they don't know how to teach people, like people with dyslexic or got ADHD or things like that. They don't know how to talk to them properly without winding them up, and I think they should, because if they did, then you wouldn't get as many kids leaving school because they can't do the work, and people's telling them that they're stupid for not being able to do it. And then if they learn how to do it, then they'll be able to teach us how to do it properly, the way we all understand. But they just don't, they just do it the way that's easiest for them.
I would say that with the use of the grid, often individuals within about 6 weeks find that they don't need to use the grid so much, because actually what they're doing is they're thinking about what would I draw if I did draw it, rather than having to draw it. So it means that they're actually thinking faster, they're not actually having to slow down and necessarily write so much or draw so much. They're actually just finding a way of storing information that is personalised as they're hearing it, rather than having to sort of say, right, I think I've got that, let me do something with that before I can move on to the next thing. And of course that's where a lot of dyslexics like myself, I spent my whole time saying, could you repeat that? You've wiped something off the board and I didn't finish copying it off.
Can you see how the grid's starting to work?
Yeah.
Like, we've started to talk.
I always
about
knew that there was something wrong with my learning, you know, but I always thought it was just like I couldn't pay attention to the teachers and that my writing was messy and I couldn't spell. I used to think that's what dyslexia was, but then Ollie's told me that it affects your behaviour and all, which nobody's ever said before. No one's ever said to me that it could have been that was making me not want to learn and not want to pay attention to him. Whenever he draws something down for me to remember, I see it and then it comes straight to me what it is I've got to remember.
So you need to be armed with a pen and a grid, and that's certainly what's been useful for me.
Ollie West can give Dwayne hope, you know, that he is capable of going out there and making something of himself. The confidence that that boy has, that even when he's on the computer now and he'll say, how do you spell this? But he's spelling it to me, whereas before he'd go, how do you spell, and never attempt to spell it. So now he's got the confidence and he wants to go back to college.
Whenever I'm in college and they tell me I've got to remember something, I'll just draw it down instead of trying to write it or asking people how to spell it. I'll just draw it, and then whenever I open the book and see it, I'll just go, oh, that's what I've got to do, straight away.
I think a lot of young offenders, if you hear their story, they're very similar, and a lot of it's down to being misunderstood and eventually just thinking, well, what's the point? If you were to catch those type of learners early on, who knows what behavioural labels we could avoid having to give to young learners.
And once you get a name for it, there's a problem. Then you're always picked on. By anything, school, police, anything. Because your name is known.
Dyslexic doesn't mean that you're stupid, that you're thick, that you're... loads of words.
I know that I'm dyslexic, so I've just got to deal with that. Nothing I can do about it, and when people read now, it just don't bother me.